Welcome back, everybody, to the Ninjas Way podcast. I am your host, Allie Johnson, and I am thrilled to introduce you to my very special guest. We have Jeff Metzger on today. Jeff is the founder of the Kids First Sports Center, which is one of the largest multi-sport facilities in the United States. Located in Cincinnati, Ohio, it has over 100,000 square feet that offers gymnastics, dance, ninja, and so much more. He is also the creator of the Small Business Bootcamp. And this is all about empowering gym owners to be able to lead their teams, build systems, and have sustainable business models. With over 5 decades of experience, he is truly a titan, a trailblazer in the industry. So, Jeff, I'm honored to have you. Welcome to the show.
Ali, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have met you at Ninja Connection last August.
Yes, absolutely. So, Jeff, there's so much to dig into, but I'd love for you to just start at the beginning. So, take us back. How did you go from building a small little rented space in the 70s to building Kids First Sports Center, which is now the largest sports center in the United States?
Yes, and I do believe, I can't prove it, but I do believe it's the largest privately owned children's instructional services operation in the world. So,
Cool.
until somebody is able to prove otherwise, they'll make that claim. Gee, you say the beginning. I was a gymnast in the Cincinnati public school system. I'm a Cincinnati guy, born and bred. And then I was a gymnast at the University of Cincinnati.
Very cool.
And while I was a junior, I was had a bad injury, a bad leg break as playing a scrub game of baseball. And that ended my gymnastics career. And while I was in that long leg cast, the coach Lee Brock came to me and said, "Hey, somebody's been calling me from Mary Ann Pierman's dance school in Northern Kentucky, and they want somebody to teach tumbling to the girls, to the dancers."
Yeah,
And I was pretty bored, having been an athlete all my life, and now I'm in a long leg cast for a year, and I took that job.
cool.
And interestingly, and frankly, I didn't like the job because I had never been around children. I didn't have younger nieces, brothers, and sisters. I'd never babysat, which counts as you move into any teaching. But I hadn't had that luxury. But I felt like a fish out of water for a period. And I don't know how long that period was. I couldn't tell you whether it was 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, but it suddenly dawned on me one day, and it was like a light bulb going on in my car as I was driving to this Saturday morning gig. I realized I was looking forward to getting to work. And I was plotting and planning how I was going to help this young child learn this and so on. And it caught me quite by surprise. It truly was serendipitous the way that happened. I continued on for a few months, not too long. And I took another couple part-time jobs, now teaching tumbling or gymnastics at a local YMCA and here or there. And then I did the very next logical things. I dropped out of mechanical engineering to actually go full-time into teaching gymnastics. And I started this operation. It was not called Kids First Sports Center in the earliest days, but started it in the church basement in 1973.
So,
That remained there in that very modest location. And it's just, by the way, it was just a 3 time a week business at that time.
sure.
And that was about a year and a half. And I thought, oh, gee, I want to start a real show. In 1975, I rented a building and then incorporated and became officially a business known as Queen City Gymnastics in that era. So that was 1975. It was a rented facility, 4,500 square foot facility. 2 years later, that was a very much an inflationary period. Many of us can remember the COVID inflationary period that we
Sure.
had, where inflation was at 9 or 9.5%. That was a highly inflationary period, and the landlord raised the rent on me, and it was a bit of a shock. And the rent rate raised from $883 to $1,100 a month. I thought, I've got to get out of this game. I can't continue down this path. So
Yeah.
somehow or another, I was able to find a cooperative contractor, very reputable, Don Nair, who really was helped coach me through. Somehow or another, I was able to scrape together the cash and build a building in 1977.
So cool.
And I joked because that was, to my knowledge, it was the first pits in the United States. I'd heard the Soviet Union had holes in the ground filled with foam rubber. I thought, I want to get me one of them. And at that time, I was still very much a tunnel vision coach. I really didn't have much business interest and certainly didn't have any business sense. So I was tunnel vision coach. And as I moved into that building in 1977, and I had no business sense, but I did have a work ethic. and a conscientiousness. And those two qualities enabled me to, good or bad, enabled me to build a business that was bigger than what I could handle. And it was about 1979 and maybe early 80. I was spiraling down. I had built a business that I didn't have the leadership skills to manage.
Mm.
And I was in classic burnout. And I said to myself one very dreary, drizzly April day, either you got to learn how to run a business or you got to get out of this gig. And I decided at that time, I'm going to learn how to run a business. So at that time, there were really no business mentors. Certainly in our industry, there were none. And
Yeah.
even in industry in general, there weren't any small business gurus. Everything was all about the corporate business. It was Peter Drucker and the likes of guys like that. But I started reading and studying, and I began to become very interested in learning how to run a business. And I decided that I could find just as much fun and gratification and fulfillment out of running a bang up business as I could in coaching the state championships.
Yeah.
So I decided that I wanted to be a businessman. And so that was the late 70s, early 80s. Throughout the entire decade of the 80s, I was just an avaricious reader and devoured everything I could
Yeah.
about, I like not much about small business, but about business in general.
Yeah.
And so that was where it really kicked it into gear. You mentioned Kids First Sports Center. I'll catch you up a little bit because, as I mentioned, we were initially incorporated as Queen City Gymnastics.
Yeah.
And then we continued to move. We had two incremental growth moments in 1984 and then again in 1988, one building a bigger building and then a bigger building. And then and then in 1998 is when we then completed the Kids First facility, which you mentioned. It was initially 86,000 square feet. That was in 1998. Even to this day, I'm not sure I had pulled that off with the assets that I had at that time, but somehow or another, I was able to scrape together the assets and build an 86,000 square foot building.
Wow.
And that was the start of really things really moving along. We've grown now with 15 and a half acres and 184,000 square feet. We calculate our foot traffic, and this includes our gymnasts, our ninja students, our
Yeah.
swimmers, the grandmas and the grandpas who might be coming to watch, etc. But we calculate our foot traffic at well over 25,000 people a week. So
That's
we built
incredible.
a little city there,
Yeah.
and I was happy that you were able to get to view it when you were out to visit us in August.
Yeah, it is a sight to be seen. And we'll chat a little bit about how you can come and check it out yourself if you are listening. But it's definitely a place that you want to check out. You speak about these growth periods, right? Where you go from a small little building into expanding into the next one, scraping together the cash to do. So, what were your indicators as far as taking that next big leap? What were the things that were pushing you towards that direction and saying, hey, we're ready to go to 86, to go to 180?
I'd like to be able to give you some ratios or some data. I'm not going to be able to do that, but I will be able to tell you that sometime recently I had somebody say, "Boy, look what you've built here. You built your dream." And I said, "It wasn't really like that at all. I didn't have unlike many business folks, I didn't go into business with a vivid picture in my mind of the grand thing that I wanted to build. When I went into business, I wanted to make payroll by the end of the week. And we
Like
were able to
most gym
continue.
owners do.
That's a good thing, right? And we were able to continue to do that successfully. And then there was another piece. Then making payroll no longer was an exciting goal. Now we wanted to build something a little bit bigger. And then as we were able to scrape together whatever was necessary in order to build that thing, then maybe a little bit of a rest. And then it was an urge to build something a little bit bigger again. What I did have at the time, and I was able to articulate this in the late 70s, early 80s, was what I call the 1% theory. And 1% theory, this because I had no grand goal other than one thing. I never wanted to retrace my steps. I wanted to step forward and only forward with never any back tracing. And I can say that except for 2020, the COVID year, for 53 years, our operation has grown every year for 53 years in revenue. And so my goal was to never retreat in revenue, to do whatever it took to broaden that revenue base. I wasn't real profit focused, especially in the earliest years. And still today, my focus has always been on building breadth of the business, strength and breadth of the business. And the profit then that'll come. So it was a goal to never retreat, always move forward. And my thought process was, and looking back, it's turned out to be fairly true, that if one dedicates oneself to do whatever it takes to grow 1% or more every year, every now and then you're going to mess up and you're going to get a 15 or 20% growth year. And that, in fact, is the way it's worked for us. So every year we have grown a little bit. So when that is your goal and you say, we will grow,
Yeah.
at some point when you get to as you're in a particular building, if in fact you have grown that 1% or more every year, you're going to have to knock out a wall, or you're going to have to shut that one down and build a bigger building. And so that's the way that worked for me. It was never this grand vision of what the finished product was going to be like. I was always afraid of not growing.
Mm.
That's what drove me. Non-growth, what I learned is that lack of growth leads to sameness, which leads to complacency,
Sure.
which leads to apathy, which leads then to degradation. And so I had a fear of not growing. And that's what's driven this business as much as anything.
I love that. And one of my core tenets in my business is grow or die, which it sounds a little extreme, but it's totally true. It's like if you're not growing, you're dying and you got to do something.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, because it's not only a financial issue, it's an emotional issue. If you
Sure.
don't have challenge,
Yeah.
then the sameness sets in, and sameness leads to boredom, and boredom to complacency, and that's just bad stuff. And I don't want to be there.
Yeah, sure. Okay, you've taken multiple big leaps to actually owning this massive building. So, what's your philosophy on building a building yourself and having ownership in it versus renting it? What kind of value do you see in either?
I'll proceed that with the caution that there's some real estate you really don't want to touch. You want to be in demographics that are going to be moving forward. You don't want to be in demographics that are becoming more and more stale each year. So with that obvious caution, I am a big believer. Again, we built it first, to my knowledge, I mentioned the first gym with pits in it. To my knowledge, it was the first custom built gym in the United States in 1977. I owned that building, and that was the springboard to the next and to the next. I become a huge believer in owning one's own real estate, owner occupied real estate. Again, with that caution that not all real estate is a good investment. So you've got to make sure you got your demographics, in particular your demographics, because you can't undo that. If you got a building problem, you can usually fix that. A demographics problem, you fix that by ditching that building and going on to and heading down the road or to a better demographics there. So
Sure.
with that caution, I'm a big believer in owning your own real estate. And those that don't own their own real estate need to educate themselves on the benefits, because not only do you get the cash flow, you also get depreciation and you also get appreciation. And it's a great way to build net worth. So I'm a big believer in owning your own real estate. As I mentioned, by the way, I didn't mention yet, we actually just a couple of years ago, we rebranded our corner as the Kids First Village.
Oh,
And the Kids First Village, as I mentioned, we have 183,000 square feet. We sit on 15 and a half acres.
yeah,
And you can imagine that the cash flow on that, and that was incremental. That started 1998. We started 86,000 square feet. But the cash flow on that has become very significant, and it's a significant part of my wealth. And if done right, it'll be a significant part of anybody's wealth in this industry. If
sure.
done right, and you got to be careful.
Yeah. And you're playing a much larger game at that point, right? It's not just the business of gymnastics or ninja or all these like micro programs. It's the real estate, the building net worth, being able to leverage your asset, right? To get into the next building and get into the next bigger space. And as I think it could be a big, scary leap for some people, there are tons of benefits to it. You fill thousands of classes, right? So, what's a marketing channel or community or strategy that still works in today's day and age, and maybe one that doesn't quite work anymore?
I'm going to start out. I did retire in 2020, so I'm no longer involved in the operations. I'm
Yeah.
involved in the strategic discussions and the strategic issues and all the real estate issues there.
Yeah.
But In terms of marketing, I think I've got to speak, first of all, very much at the strategic level,
Sure.
because the tactical level has changed dramatically, and I'm not an expert in that, but I have become a pretty good strategic marketer. And I look at marketing, the foundation of marketing, your marketing strategy is the story. That's the story that you tell to the customer that causes the customer to see your operation as the one and only one that could possibly satisfy their needs and solve any of their problems there. So
Yeah.
that's the way I look at strategic marketing. And I'll say this about marketing in this industry, because it is such a, even still today, it is still a word of mouth industry, whether it's eyeball to eyeball or across the digital. In this industry, a business can be strategically strong and tactically weak, and it can exist and maybe even exist well. But a business that's tactically strong and has all of that it's hitting all the right airwaves, et cetera, but doesn't know their story and can't tell a compelling story, that's where you're going to fall down. So a
Yeah.
business can be strategically strong, technically weak, and be okay. Those businesses that focus on the tactics, the when and the where, rather than the story, those are the businesses that will struggle in this industry here.
And part of your guys' story is helping kids grow into happy, healthy, and responsible adults.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
When did you guys land on that story, right? Healthy, happy, responsible adults, right? How long has that been the story?
Quite interesting story for part of our history. When we first started in business, first of all, this goes back. I was not an only child, but my sister was 6 years younger than me, so I grew up somewhat as an only child. I was not my family was my parents were not worldly. I never traveled outside of the city. I was I wasn't a real confident kid, especially in a social situation. When I found gymnastics, I had an aptitude, not to overstate that by any means, but I had an aptitude and the confidence for me personally, the confidence that I gained through the physical world,
Mhm.
specifically gymnastics, began to transcend into other parts of my life.
Yeah.
And I went from being a child who really didn't have much of an identity or confidence to somebody who probably some of my junior high teachers might say I had a little too much over the top. But yet I became that through the physical world, I became a much more confident person. And so the concept of that was very much in me when I started to teach. As I mentioned, I didn't enjoy it, but I just only because I didn't know my students and I really didn't have much of a curriculum. Not a great place to be. But I
Sure.
stuck with that. And so when I began to really get into teaching, it was very much a goal of mine to teach, as you say, to holistically, to teach to the total child. So that was right from the very beginning that I understood. Now, I wasn't able to articulate, I haven't put it in words too much yet. As I started in business, now we're in the mid 70s. I developed what I called, by the way, at this time, I didn't know there was such thing as a business mission. There was no education.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about that.
Sure.
But I had enough intuitive sense, and I developed what we called our underlying teaching philosophy. And our underlying teaching philosophy is nothing is more important than a child's self-esteem. And I felt very strongly about that.
Yeah.
But the public hijacked the concept of self-esteem.
It has.
And it went from feeling a true sense of worth, and we went into making sure that we protect our children from disappointments and things
Mhm.
that maybe aren't going to build the most resilient child. And when the public hijacked the concept of self-esteem,
Mhm.
I said, that's enough. We've got to ditch, we have to separate ourselves from self-esteem. And we tried on at that time, we tried on for size happy, healthy, confident kids. And that didn't get it for me. I think we spent maybe a year there. I'm not sure. And I can't say that's a wrong-headed notion. I can say that it just wasn't inspiring to me and therefore it wasn't good for the company. And so after perhaps a year, we began to refine and say, what is the foundation of happy and healthy kids? And I had now I'm an adult. Had experienced dealing with people who had not proven to be very responsible. And by and large, people who spent a few years not being responsible weren't very happy.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they weren't very healthy. And so I looked at that happy, healthy, confident. I said, happy, healthy, I like that. Okay,
Mm.
let's keep that. But yet, what's the foundation of happiness? And I believe then and to this day that happiness can't coexist with irresponsibility. So our focus, we give kids tools to grow into happy, healthy, responsible adults. Now, we will actually rephrase that because the specific language, it means nothing, but the spirit of it means everything. We'll rephrase that depending on the situation there. But yet, our focus is happy. That's self-evident. Healthy. We're a sports organization. Obviously, we want strength and flexibility and even cellular health, but we also are very much interested in emotional health, which at the time we started talking about that wasn't a hot button for society like it is today.
Right.
But yet our focus is on responsibility.
Yeah.
And without responsibility, we feel that we're not going to be able to achieve happiness and healthiness. You want me to talk for a half hour about responsibility and what it is and what it isn't? I'll be happy to do that. Responsibility is a hot button word for us, and it pervades our leadership strategy, the way we teach our children,
Does.
um, the way we talk to people.
The ethos of that, you feel it. It oozes off the walls and off of your staff members and the people that I was able to connect with while I was there. It's very much something that came from top down leadership, but it has gone to all of the people and touched the staff members that are in your facility. Kids First Sports Center houses dozens of different kinds of activities, right? Gymnastics, dance, ninja, swim, all of these things. So, how do you decide when to add a new program, when it adds synergy, or when does it create cannibalism within what you guys currently have already? And this might go back to your effort to want to continue to grow at 1%, but what indicators that tell you, hey, we're going to add this program and maybe not add others?
Okay, we never worried too much about the fear of cannibalism. In early days, I did till I understood the concept of synergy. And really, one of the things that I remember going through a thought exercise in my mind, saying, we're talking 40 years ago at this point,
Yeah.
was we had developed in Cincinnati something called an auto mall.
Mm.
And it's a common concept now. And I thought, so the Chevrolet dealer is going to park right next to the Ford dealer, which is right next to the
Yeah,
Toyota dealer, and I thought, well, that's a foolish thing to do. And at the time, that was my mindset.
sure.
And then I saw that develop, and I thought maybe that wasn't as foolish as what I thought.
Hmm.
And maybe the reality of cannibalism is there is a reality to it, but maybe the reality of synergy is bigger than cannibalism. So, to answer your question, we don't focus too much on that. I'm not saying it's never a thought, and we haven't uttered those words when we're deciding on a program. So,
Yeah.
let me tell you now. So, for a moment, let's just say we park the concept of cannibalism
Hmm.
and don't focus too much on that because we just plain don't believe too much in that. But as far as what programs we might add, now we've got the logistics of square footage, et cetera. So that's an obvious. If you want to start a new program that requires square footage, you got to provide the square footage. But the thought process when we were making decisions and throughout the years, is it good for kids? Does it fit into our mission? Is it good for kids? And is there a business viability behind it? In other words, let's do some projections and let's see what those projections are going to look like. Now, there's nothing new under the sun with that, but that was our internal mantra. Is it good for kids? And does it have a business viability? You're going to say, what means of business? I can't tell you exactly what that means because not all programs have to be huge to be
Sure.
good for kids and to be viable. It
Yeah.
depends on the square footage that they occupy and other factors like that. So once we start a program, so this might be of interest to some of your readers because we have had people look at Kids First Sports Center. And here we're a multi-venue program. We're kind of like the pinnacle of multi-venue programs in the nation. And I've spoken in these terms for many years. And I've had people then tell me that, yes, they decided to be a multi-venue program and they tell me about their operation. And I think, ooh, they've blown it here or they've blown it here, there, because what we have, let me give you some definitions and I'll make myself clear, I hope. And that is when we look at a new program, is it good for kids? If it's not good for kids, we don't want it. Okay. Is it good for our age children too? For instance, we looked at ice hockey, but yet our bread and butter is going to be kids that are primarily, we have kids all the way through high school, of
Sure.
course, But our bread and butter is the 3 to 7, 3 to 8 year old age group.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen hockey, just hockey rinks, and I didn't like what I saw, and we said no, that's not good for our kids. So
Sure.
then we do the viability study. We say, okay, well, apparently there is a business opportunity here.
Mm,
Let's try it. Let's pilot this program. And so then that we will then put the term, the moniker of this is now a pilot program.
mm,
We've done a little bit of research, or maybe a lot of research, depending on the size or the dollar commitment behind the program. We
sure.
decided that yes, there may be a business viability there. We don't know for sure,
Mhm.
but yet we're going to go down this path. And so we tip our toe in the water, and that's called a pilot program. And then this pilot program will then perhaps, or perhaps not, but it will perhaps grow to what we call a program that has flow.
Okay.
Now, a program that has flow is a program that has enough enrollment base to justify various levels. So we might have a beginner, intermediate, advanced, just to use common parlance there. But when you first pilot a program, you may only have one level of classes, okay? And you've got some of your novice athletes or students, and then some of the more advanced. And we all know the challenges when you have that. But
Yeah.
and so it's got to have enough enrollment breadth in order to justify
Sure.
a level and then another level and then another level. Now, there's no magic number for this. It is simply we know it when we see it. And that's if it doesn't get enough breadth to have flow,
Mm,
then it's no longer a pilot program, it's a splinter program.
okay.
And a splinter program actually might be profitable. You've got a dozen kids in a class and it takes an hour. Okay, you've been trying, it's a pilot program, but it can't grow past a dozen kids, or it started at 20 and then it's dwindled down to a dozen, but it's a profitable hour.
Sure.
So a splinter program, we won't necessarily kill it. We might, okay, if we need that space, but we'll allow a splinter program to exist until which time we need to then put more resources into it.
Sure.
And then that's when we would kill it. So there's a big difference in a pilot program and a splinter program. In more common parlance, I guess you'd say a pilot program, we believe, has the potential to
Mm,
grow into a program that's got flow. And then a splinter program is a program that we're going to allow it to exist, but we've come to the conclusion that it doesn't have, for whatever reasons, maybe we don't have the right real estate for it or the right, it might be within us. It's not that it wouldn't be a viable program elsewhere, but
yeah.
it's a splinter program, and splinter programs take a disproportionate amount of resource, and we're
Mm,
not going to put any resource into it. So
sure.
if it'll exist and it's profitable and we don't have to add resource, then it'll exist until something changes there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know I haven't given you any numbers,
Oh, that's
but
okay.
we don't think about numbers like that.
Sure.
If
Yeah.
it's got flow, then we'll keep putting resources in it and try to broaden that enrollment base.
Where would you define ninja? This might have came a little bit out of your time of your exit, at least from how I understand ninja being entered into Kids First Sports Center. But where would you, is it a flow program? Is it a
Oh,
splinter
absolutely.
program? Okay.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. We have rough numbers, and I don't check the numbers. I'm not intimately familiar with the numbers. I have
Sure.
to ask now.
I
But we
like
have
that
about
you say
500
that.
kids in the Ninja program. There's absolutely flow. We have a competitive stream. We've got various levels of classes, various ages. So
Yeah.
you get to 500 kids, you've got flow.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
you've got flow.
Oh,
Our area arts program, I think we're in about 125, 150 children at this point,
okay.
and it's got flow, and it's got flow. Think of flow as having reached that thing called critical mass, where
Mm,
it begins to take on a little bit of life of its own, and you're not having to push so hard on the flywheel to keep that thing going.
yeah.
And you say, how many? I can't tell you. I don't know what that number is, but it's more of an intuitive sense. You know it when you see it.
But I like that you say, I don't intimately know the numbers with a big smile on your face. Like that is almost a state of being able to have a team that supports itself. Like you can now not be in the day to day knowing the numbers of the operation. That is something I know a lot of business owners are really hungry to get to, right? How long did it take you to really be able to actually delegate yourself out of that position and having a team that runs itself?
First of all, I mentioned the formal education that I have, And I don't want to overstate that. I want to be very clear. I did not take my formal education very seriously.
Sure.
But the formal education that I do have was in mechanical engineering. So that indicates I've got a fairly kind of analytical mind.
Yeah.
And anybody that, not necessarily if you are an engineer, would you know this?
Mm.
But if you live with an engineer, you know this.
Yeah, sure.
But engineers know better than everybody else about a whole lot of most things in the world. And so engineers are notoriously poor delegators. We engineers, we think things through very carefully and very thoroughly and better than others. And so we find it very difficult to, if you will, let go and
Mm.
watch something be done initially at maybe 80% of the efficiency or the effectiveness that I might be able to do that. That's so engineers are notoriously poor delegators, as was I.
Mm.
And I told you that I was sinking. I was spiraling down, not in the earliest days of my business, but after I was in business, now we're talking 73, 79, 6 years. It was large enough that now I had to delegate because the hub and the stereotypical hub and spoke organizational strategy approach to business, that works great to a point.
Yeah, for
Businesses
now.
this size, a hub and spoke works great.
Yeah.
Once it gets to whatever size that is, and we call that the 503 rule, but
Okay.
once you get to about 500 kids and three separate types of programs, the complexities are such that
Hmm.
you're going to have to begin to decentralize the decision making and delegate the responsibilities there. So, how long did it take me? I started studying about business after I was in business about 6 years. And I did it, it was necessity.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to become a business person because I was sinking.
Mm.
And so I learned, I did. I was good. I will say I was a pretty good student. And I did learn, I did understand where I was going wrong with delegation. And I started first with my organizational strategy and redid the whole organizational strategy, divided all the positions up with the various responsibilities necessary to fulfill the promise to the client.
Mm.
And then you go about the task of delegating, which means truly letting go and giving those responsibilities,
Yeah.
bestowing those responsibilities to someone else. So it started for me about 6 years into business out of necessity. There was a learning period, certainly, but I was a pretty good student, I think. I didn't resist the notions. I had to work on the concepts and my mindset there. But I became a pretty doggone good delegator fairly quickly, which was the reason my business then started to really blossom around that time. So that said, once I began to understand how to decentralize decisions and delegate that, decentralization is an executive decision to move decisions away from you. Delegation is a personal effectiveness skill that
Mm.
we must
Sure.
acquire in order for decentralization to be effective. That it was, I don't mean to say it was sudden, but it turned around quickly once I truly understood what delegation was. And I felt the blossoming of the business real quickly. And I say real quickly, after a couple of years, you're going to say, that's a pretty long time. In the big picture, no, it's not.
Sure.
Business is, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And so now I'm in the 80s and now I understand what responsibilities are and how to delegate them and how to move. So now the rest was a process. Now we began to have managers. Now we're in the early 80s. I am now, to put it in a perspective, I'm 8, 9 years into my business.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to understand some things I didn't. And so I'm beginning to have managers and to truly delegate and stay out of their hair, if you will.
Yeah.
And so that, and then I just became better and better. I worked at it, continually worked at it. I worked at my leadership and my leadership strategies throughout the, gee whiz, the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Sure.
And to the point where when it was time, now I've really done a big jump now, but now it's time for me to retire. And many of
Yeah.
my friends, many of them said, oh, you won't, they knew how hard I worked and how much I cared about the business. And they said, oh, you won't be able to retire. And yeah, that
Mm.
nothing could be further from the truth. The day I said, I am here, and Jennifer was put in the president CEO. The day that I said, you are now president, I moved out of decision making.
Yeah.
And so but that was very easy because I had practiced throughout the years. I understood it 10 years into my business, 8, 9, 10 years into my business, and
Mm.
practiced it for the next 20 or 30. And so when it was time for me to become truly involved only in the strategic level and not at all in the tactical decision making level, it was a finger snap.
Yeah.
So it may appear to have been, but it was really also 20, 30 years of practice too.
Sure. And about 2 months ago, I'm out in Ohio. I'm sitting at dinner with Jennifer, and she's telling me tales about you and your leadership strategy. And she's talking about when you made this shift, when you decided to retire. And this happened around 2020. Hard time for gym business, a really hard time for a lot of business owners out there. But she's telling me about the woes of this time frame and how you stood so strong in your ability to allow her the room to fail. And I think that this is one of the most underrated leadership principles is allowing the people around you. It's one thing to delegate, it's another thing to allow them the space to fail or succeed, right? And just them having that room. And I think that this is really hard for people to learn how to let go. So, for maybe a gym owner or a leader who's struggling with this, what advice would you give them?
Where to start on that? What true words you just spoke, and how critical it is for one to grow a truly generational business and have any quality of life, personal life too,
Yeah.
is to understand and grasp. By the way, this all of a sudden, many people have trouble allowing themselves mistakes.
Mm,
We've all seen it. And, I'm not immune to that either, for that matter. The first thing is to understand that a mistake, to disallow a mistake in oneself or one's others
mm,
in a business setting, is the same as saying, try nothing new, do nothing to make things better,
mm.
do only that which to be able to do without any failure. So to say
And then there's no growth.
there's no growth,
Yeah.
there's no growth. If one only does what one knows how to do without a misstep, let's stay away from the word mistake for a minute.
Sure.
If one only challenges themselves, I can't even use that word. There's no challenge in that.
Mm,
I'll do what I know. I will, so that I don't make a misstep. Until one realizes that for one's personal life,
mm,
that then there's no growth. Or if you're in a supervisory position, for one's employees, to disallow them to grow is to say, do nothing new, make nothing better,
yeah.
just don't make a mistake. And I don't think everybody I've ever asked, and I've asked this question many times in a seminar setting, et cetera, I ask people to raise their hand if you would like to work in that setting. Nobody raises their hand.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to create a business and a culture that not only allows mistake, but actually encourages it and applies it.
Mm,
That's what we
yes.
did many years ago. But if one cannot allow themselves a mistake, they're
Mm,
likely to have difficulty letting go. So the first step is to truly understand the importance of making a mistake,
yeah.
of allowing oneself to make mistakes. If one wants to have an exciting life, I'll go that far, but that's not what this topic is about.
Yeah.
But if one wants to grow a business,
Mm,
you're going to have to allow yourself to make mistakes.
yes.
And therefore, and as well, then others too. That's the grasping that,
Yeah.
and then being able to say it to your 14, 15, 16-year-old employees, your job is to make mistakes here.
Sure. Yeah.
And which we do. And people say, no, you couldn't really say that, do you? Just, yeah, hang around a little bit, you'll understand. Yeah.
No, I love that. And in this essence of failing forwards, right? And I think it really speaks to your guys' ethos of building happy, healthy, responsible adults. And that starts with failing and trying again. And this is why I love Ninja as a modality so much because it's so centered around this. You have to fail. It's super hard, right? It's not an easy thing that you can just pick up. It's something that's extremely challenging. And I love that you had brought up your younger employees because a lot of these businesses are built off of 14, 15-year-olds. Maybe this is their first job that they've ever done. I will say your team, Jennifer and Reese, shared some awesome strategies around this at Ninja Connect, that it's really trying to connect to the current generation, because each generation is going to have its own struggles and nuances too, that we have to conform to some degree. And when it comes to running the business, we can't just ignore and say, oh, Gen Z, they just suck. That's not an applicable strategy, right? For us to be able to grow a program around these kids, we have to learn how to understand them, speak their language, and meet them where they are at, right? And understand these like generational differences. Let's move on to small business boot camp. So, how did this start? Who is it intended for? And what are you hoping people walk away with after coming to small business boot camp?
Oh boy, small business boot camp. You ask how it started. It started in 1991.
Mm,
And I doubt if there's many business workshops with Vitality that have that kind of a record. And it started because we had begun to separate ourselves from the industry in that those mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s.
mm,
And I gave some thought to, and that was an era when there really weren't many people paying attention to the business. I began to give some thought to possibly franchising our operation.
okay.
I looked at that and I looked at the concept of franchising and what makes a product easily franchisable versus not so easily franchisable, and decided that we'd leave that to McDonald's. Flipping hamburgers is easier than flipping children.
Sure.
Okay. Because it is a true, as we know, it's a true relationship business, and franchising, relationship building is going to be difficult. So not to say it can't be done, but I decided that's not so how do I leverage my knowledge
Mm,
that was the origin of that. How do I leverage what we've done here and help other people? And then the idea about boot camp that hatched, and just like Reese started Ninja Connect here this August, and I'm sure I had some influence on the idea, but 1991, I said, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do a total immersion workshop. And we're going to make tuition all inclusive. We're going to take care of people from the moment they hit the tarmac at CVG to the moment we take them back to the tarmac at CVG. We're going to live together. We're going to eat breakfast, lunch, dinners together, and we're going to change business. We're going to change lives. So what's that? That was the concept there. What do we do that is truly meaningful and different, that it's not just pick up an idea here and there. We're not looking to give a person an idea about a new system, which, by the way, there's a lot of systems. There's dozens of systems that we talk about at boot camp. But the foundation of boot camp, it's the strategic building blocks of a business. And
mm,
we want people to walk away with a working knowledge of how to build a generational business without the gaps that cause those recurring problems that so many people are faced with in business. I make this point every year, and you're going to get in business, you're going to have challenges.
yeah.
You're going to have problems. Okay. And these one-off problems, let's take COVID. The one-off problems can be very difficult to foresee and difficult to plan for
Yeah.
and to prepare for. All right. So when you get a one-off problem, you're going to have to drop what you're doing and you're going to have to address it. It's the recurring problems that really eat away at your soul. It's those problems that were there yesterday, they're there today, and they're going to be there tomorrow unless we do something meaningful, some true foundational changes
Mm,
in the strategic building blocks of our business. So we look at the various strategies in building a business. Your core strategy, that's going to be why you exist, your promise that you make to the clients, and your values and your principles upon which that guide everybody towards the fulfilling of that promise. Your organizational strategy is your division of responsibilities that are necessary to be fulfilled if you're going to deliver on that promise. Right?
right.
There's a whole lot of stuff that's got to be done in a successful business. Who's going to do it? That's your organizational strategy. And what are the positions called? And what are the responsibilities of each position? And then you've got your leadership strategy. Your leadership strategy, what's your chosen means? What's your chosen way of inspiring others to give their best self towards alignment to the core strategy. And there's a whole lot of ways to do that. And if I started a little bit on that topic, I'd keep going. But it's the mother of all business skills, at least in this industry, in my opinion, is understanding what leadership is and what it is, and then your marketing strategy and what's that story that you tell the clients that cause them that compel them to see that you're the one and only operation that can fulfill what they want for their kids.
Yeah.
And the failure to address and fully flesh out those strategic building blocks is the source of recurring problems.
Yeah. Recurring problems, they create burnout in gym owners. And I talk to a lot of gym owners, I'm sure you do as well. And a lot of them are burnt out. So, what's a leadership lesson that you would give to owners who are trying to grow but are just stuck in being burnt out?
This is going to sound self-serving and trite, but try coming to boot camp.
Yeah.
And I mean that very literally. I've quit being namby-pamby about telling people about boot camp. I say, tell me about boot camp. I say, show up. We guarantee it. Okay, if you get your tuition back, if it doesn't meaningfully make a difference in your business, and so just show up, be there, because because boot camp. We can talk a few sentences about what to do, but you really a boot camp is it educational? Absolutely. Is it informational? Absolutely. More than anything, it's experiential. And so you get to see and experience. You said it. You said you could see it oozing out of our company when you were there, and that our culture. And so when you experience something, the lessons are far more impactful and indelible than when you learn it through the written word or the spoken word. I mean, you can't make it. You can't spend 3 days at our place on November 13th through 17th. Let me give you our definition of leadership. So that might tell, if you ask, and I don't mean to put myself in expert category, but if you ask 100 experts, you're going to get 100 different definitions. Here's our definition. It's a working definition. And by that, I mean, it's the definition that we talk about and we teach one another back home in our operation, because a working definition, it can give you guidance
Yeah.
in leadership. But leadership is a skill to inspire others to voluntarily dig deep and give their best self towards the accomplishment of the goal of the cause. And I say voluntarily, well, how do you inspire somebody to voluntarily give excellence? That's a word, by the way. I tend to stay away from the word excellence because it's buzzed so much, but I'll use it here with that caution. But you cannot demand or command excellence. You can try, but good luck. You might be able to get it for a moment if you use really strong intimidation tactics. You'll demand excellence, but you must inspire excellence. And it's something when someone gives excellence to their job, they do it voluntarily. They don't do it because anybody, in particular, their supervisor or even their mom or their dad told them to. Those who give excellence to what they do it because that's what they've decided. That's the way they want to go about their life. And that's the way I do things. So that's what leadership is, learning how to inspire others. And we want to go on for another couple of hours. We could go on another couple of hours about that. But that's the mother of all skills in this industry, is
Yeah.
inspiring people to voluntarily give their best self in alignment with your core strategy there. And I think it's probably the best we can do in a setting like this.
Yeah,
Right?
sure. Like I said, it was 5 decades of experience just scratching the surface here in 45 minutes. But if you want more, we need to come to boot camp. I'm going to be there. I'm super excited to experience.
Fly, by the way. I'm glad you're coming. Thank you.
Yes. And so this is November 13th through the 17th. Where can people find the information to get started with boot camp?
How about info at metzgerbootcamp.com?
Awesome.
It's probably going to be your best, most direct source, or metzgerbootcamp.com, the website. So you can email, you reach Megan at info@metzgerbootcamp.com, or take a scan at the website Metzger, Metzger, bootcamp.com. So
Awesome.
those are probably the most direct ways to learn about that.
So let's end with this. If there was one belief that you've completely changed your mind on, what would it be?
Good question. I can tell you about changes in beliefs about how business works, about life in general. I can do a whole session about change in beliefs because I've got handfuls of 180-degree beliefs I made during that epiphany few years that I earlier mentioned. My biggest shift in belief about business, I'm going I'm going to go back to a quote that's a quote by Thomas Jefferson: "In matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand like a rock." And that quote was the right words at the right time for me. And I did not understand the difference between fundamental principles and rules and ways of doing things. And that quote just hit me at the right time. So I saw the value in that immediately. Then the next thought was, okay, boy, we better figure out what our principles are and what our value system is, which is going right back to that first part of boot camp I talked about. So your core values.
Yeah.
And we hadn't done that. The value of that quote hit me, and I realized that we had not established our principles.
Mm.
And so I didn't know where to stand and where to swim with the current. And therefore, I was going through my business days very confused in a kind of a wishy-washy fashion, and I was getting results consistent with being confused and being wishy-washy. And so once we established our principles, which if you spend any time talking with Jennifer, you've heard probably she's mentioned the non-negotiables. There are certain things that are non-negotiable. Those are the principles. And we've really fleshed that out and we know what those are. And on those, we don't negotiate. And on everything else, go have some fun. Just
Sure.
don't sweat the small stuff, but pay attention to the big stuff.
Yeah.
And
And those core values are absolutely the big stuff. And I think sometimes people get confused when it comes to core values that it's they write down a mission statement or they write down their core values and they put it on their business plan and then they put it in a drawer and it just collects dust. And so it's like, okay, what is the difference between taking these core values and having them be a filter to every decision that you make in your business, to how your staff interact with your customers? It should be a lens that's put on the business that people can act in accordance to these things, right? They should be living and breathing within the walls of your facility. So, do you have any advice for people from taking these aspirational things off of a poster and putting them into practice into the business?
first of all, you said what you said is so true. And you said it well. It's not, and I've used that same analogy as you spend time establishing your core values and into the drawer they go, never to see. And what we've done is we've
Yeah,
wasted ink and paper.
sure,
So you must become your core values. They must be front and center and present. I don't mean on the wall. Put them on the wall. It's a great thing,
sure.
but they must be front and center in the discussions that you have, every meeting that you have, every decision that's big, every decision that's little. Interesting. I was in Australia this summer at a gymnastics event.
Yeah.
I thought, and actually, I've forgotten the title of the topic that I was offering, but it was a general topic. That's what they wanted. So I thought, what are the most important advice? I thought, I'm going to do a little segment. The most important advice for my Australian friends from all the department leaders back home at Kids First.
Yeah.
And to a person, the most important piece of advice that they could give you was to identify your core values and then to live your core values. They used all sorts of words that were surrounding that notion. In other words, don't start a business until you do. That's the foundation of your business. And when I say foundation, one might think, okay, build your foundation, and that's the last time you ever address it. No, huh? It's the foundation of your business, but it's daily occurrence in every discussion you have. You make your hiring decisions by it, you make your firing decisions by it, you make your no-go decisions by it, and you talk about it. Let's just say you incessant. It's how do you do it? By making it front and center in everything that you do. And that starts, yeah, to use your terminology, that starts at the top.
Yeah.
That one person at the top, whoever that may be, they have got to start talking your values every turn, at every meeting. And pretty soon you'll start to hear other people start to use that same lexicon. I do a whole talk on your company's lexicon. So when you start to hear other people use that company lexicon, that's when you know you've really done something. And I'm sure you heard that when you were at Kids First Sports Center. If you talked with any of our department leaders, I'm sure in one form or another, the value system came up
Oh,
because
absolutely.
that's front and center for every decision. Repetition. Oh, and live it.
Yeah.
If you were to happen to have a principle, let's just pick one out and use, and the principle's trustworthiness. I'll use this word with quotes. Try imposing trustworthiness in your company if you're not trustworthy.
Sure.
Try encouraging others to be trustworthy if you're not trustworthy. Yeah. We could say the same with integrity. We could say the same with about respect. You can't, yeah, yeah, you got to live it. You
No,
got to
I
live
love that. And it's the difference between being aspirational and actionable, right? Is actually living it out.
Yes. Yeah, yes. And that concept of objectivity and transparency comes to mind as I'm speaking here. But I've made over the years I've had to make many decisions that some people don't like. Okay. It's not the same decision they would like to have heard. But we are so transparent. But it's important piece of our success is we are very transparent in our thought process, in our data. We are an open book company. So we're very transparent in our data and our thought process, which is the very thing that allows people to buy in and accept decisions that they may not like,
Yeah.
that they may not agree with. And the lack of transparency will guarantee that decisions that someone may not like become problematic. So
Sure.
that's the difference between not liking a decision and then having it cause a problem or a conflict there. So I know I introduced a new thought there with transparency, but we are huge believers in open book management.
Yeah, and that was very apparent to me. It was something that stood out was being very open with your numbers and your stats and like you said the data behind the business and not only taking the step to say, "Hey, we're going to be open book about this," but also empowering your department leaders for them to be take ownership of their stats. And so it's not now the company, it's them as an individual being able to understand these numbers and take responsibility for them. And I'm sure that's empowering to them to want to grow the numbers.
Yes, absolutely. I'll put this in some practical terms.
Yeah.
Take a company like ours that shares the data, teaches how to interpret the data, empowers others to make decisions surrounding using that data,
Yeah.
and then take them out of our company and put them in another company where that's not there.
Yeah. They're going to
Right.
be
They're not.
really discouraged.
It is, you talk about to encouraging retention.
Mm.
Open book management, our open book management makes it very difficult to go to a closed book company for another employee. They
Yeah.
wouldn't thrive there because for us, it's not the way we do it, it's the way it should be done. I'm not a fan of the word should, but I'll use it right there. That's the way every business should operate. And once you've experienced that, you don't want to go back.
Yeah, absolutely. Very.
So now we're back into leadership and things such as retaining employees and et cetera. But
Yeah. Jeff, thank you so much for your insight, sharing your expertise today. And for those of you who are listening to this, again, this is only scratching the surface. So if you want more, definitely sign up for Bootcamp. Be there this year. It's going to be November 13th through the 17th. And I hope that you're able to join us. Jeff, any last minute thoughts to leave our listeners with?
my last minute thought would be to you. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a real pleasure. I enjoyed our brief moments last August when you were at Kids First, and I've enjoyed getting to know you better here. And not just thank you for inviting me, but the service that you do for others in an effort to help them grow their business and basically have a more a delightful life. Running a business, if you're struggling, is not delightful, but running a great business when you really are hitting on all cylinders, that's fun. And
Yeah,
when you can help somebody do that, that's a pretty neat thing. So
yes, absolutely.
good on you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Allie. It's been a real pleasure.